Hey, welcome to Next Level Method Podcast. I'm Richard Ryerson.
And I'm Matt Lilly.
And we're here to help you take your life to the next level. Let's get started. Wow, Dr. Lotte Valentin, what a fun conversation. I really enjoyed this one. I love talking about, it's ironic we were talking about the afterlife and the spiritual world and what happens. And here
yesterday.
We've got a guest that has had 2 NDEs or near-death experiences, and that was the catalyst to living the life, this rich life that she's leading now. Med School After Menopause is the book that she wrote, the first of books, and went to med school when she was 54. Is that what she told us?
I think that's right.
So she's a physician,
right?
And she combines the
spiritual, mental side with the actual medicine side.
She keeps it separate, but combines it when it's necessary. And I just love her approach. What would you think about this?
I think this is, we love doing the show, right? We love talking to people that are doing great work in the world, and this is one of those hidden gems that you just don't expect, right? You come in and you're like, oh, she's a doctor, and we're going to talk to her about medical stuff, and then the next thing you know, we're talking about the afterlife and her experience of that, and making it very real and tangible because she comes from a very scientific background, and so I think she's just a delight to listen to talk to hear her perspectives on things, and she's just so practical in her approach. She's not out there. She's like,
because when you hear these things, you think
exactly. No, she's very
pragmatic, very pragmatic, common sense,
And I love the format of her book, and I look forward to reading it. So, I think it was a great show today.
You're really gonna like this one, guys. Dr. Lotte Valentin. All right, appreciate you being a follower of the show. If you're brand new to it, please follow us on your favorite podcast application. Go to nextlevelmethod.com to learn everything that we're doing at Next Level Method and become part of our community. Download the app, look at the live events that are coming up in 2022. And again, please follow us on your favorite podcast application. We do appreciate it. All right, let's get on with this great conversation with Dr. Lotte Valentin here on Next Level Method. Dr. Lotte Valentin, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm honored to be a guest on your podcast today.
Yeah. I'm excited to learn about, you were talking about your book in the pre-recording, the Med School After Menopause. So you went to medical school when you were 54. That's amazing. So what led you up to that point? What were you doing prior to that, and what led you to go to medical school?
Right. So I wrote the book after I graduated from medical school, which was in 2016, actually. So not that long ago. But I'm hoping to inspire other people to know that it doesn't matter where they're at in their life. There is always an opportunity to change and go after your true passion. But what led me to go to medical school when I was 54 was that I had 2 near-death experiences, one in 1992 and one in 1994. And during these experiences, I left my body and went to the other side.
Wow.
And then came back. And so my perspective of who I am and how I fit into this world completely changed. Because before I had these experiences, I was a systems analyst. I was a programmer working for IBM. I was very structured, very logical, approached life very scientifically. I had no beliefs in spirituality, the afterlife, clairvoyance, anything like that, because that was, if you could not prove it to me scientifically, as far as I was concerned, it didn't exist. And then I had these experiences, and it was life-changing, because all of a sudden I had a completely different perspective of what the world is and how I exist in this world. And so I became clairvoyant and started hearing things, and we can talk more about that. But it led me to go to medical school because the spirit world started connecting with me. I started hearing things. You're going to be in an accident. These 2 kids are going to be in your car, and this person is sick, and this person is going to die. And all these messages would come in. And this went on for an extended period of time. So it started the day after my first near-death experience in 1992. And I was lying in the hospital because my first experience happened in the ER. I was hemorrhaging to death after the birth of my 3rd child.
Oh, man.
And I'm lying in this hospital bed, and my sister-in-law had just passed away. And I'm thinking I'm going crazy. That must have been hallucination. You can't just leave your body or have an experience like this. I think I'm going crazy, and I'm struggling for my life lying in this hospital bed. And I hear my sister-in-law saying, "It's going to be okay." And again, I'm thinking I'm going crazy. So it took me a long time to really understand what happened and to learn about near death experiences and what other people have experienced. And then over this period of 12 years, from 1992 to 2004, I would get messages from the spirit world. And eventually I would start writing them down, or I would tell my kids about it or my husband, because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a deja vu. Am I just going crazy? Where is this coming from? Like, how could I know this? Maybe it's just a deja vu. But then I would have written it down, or I would have told my kids. So after 12 years, the spirit world dropped in on me, and I was on my computer, and I was thinking, okay, my kids are teenagers now. I got to think about going back to work, but I didn't want to go back to the systems analyst and the programming. I wanted to work as a healer, because after all, my father was a physician, and my mom was a hospital floor administrator. I was surrounded by medicine growing up. It had always been a passion of mine. And I looked on the computer and I found this degree, naturopathic medicine. Wow, it sounded amazing. You combine the Western medicine with that kind of traditional old medicine and botanical medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's a medical school. I can't go to medical school. I'm in my 40s now. So I just closed the computer and walked to my kitchen, and then the spirit world again drops in and says, no, you have to go to medical school and you have to be a naturopathic doctor. You have to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And you have to bring messages and healing to the people. And I'm looking at, in my living room, I can sense the spirits are there, but I can't see them because I wasn't developed enough yet. The messages would just drop in. And the thing is that a lot of us get messages, and some people will say it's my gut instinct, or is it somebody that's telling you something, you heard something, you felt something. So that is what I'm trying to awaken with my book, and help other people tune into that, because we are such spiritual creatures and we all have intuition. We know that. And so they dropped in on me in my living room and said, you have to go to medical school. And within a week, I was enrolled in the prereq classes for med school, the organic chemistry, the physics, the biology. And the funny part of this is that I did not go to school in the United States. I grew up in Sweden, which is in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia, just underneath the North Pole. And I didn't move to the United States until I was 21. So in Sweden, we actually major in high school. So I majored in languages and business. So I didn't have science classes. 9th grade was the last time I had science. So I did not have advanced biology from high school or advanced chemistry. I actually had to take the advanced placement classes for high school in order to get into my prereqs at the local college. That's just a message to everybody out there that, it's all baby steps, and everybody can go after their true passion, and you just have to take baby steps in that direction. Because if I went to med school after I was in menopause, I had been in menopause for almost 10 years when I went to med school. And we have to learn to look at life in a different way, because, in the old days, our parents and grandparents, 50 was old. I remember my dad having a big party. He turned, it's like he made it to 50. Right? Now, 50 is like 35.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
okay,
We hope so anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to live a long time. And, transforming your life in your 50s is nothing. What if you're going to be 100? You
Right.
haven't even lived your half of your adult life yet. So
You need to be my longevity coach.
Yeah,
I decided that right now. You and I need to just talk on a weekly basis. And you just say you're not even halfway
You're
through
not
yet.
halfway through your
you're,
life.
You're like a child. You're like a baby, Matt. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. I love it.
Wow.
Hey, you did talk about 2 near-death experiences. I know you had one around the birth of your 3rd daughter. When did the other one occur? And can you give us a little snippet of that?
yeah. Yeah, right. So after I had my first near-death experience and I hemorrhaged to death, I got really sick, and I had something called bone marrow suppression, when you have a suppression of your white blood cells, your red blood cells, and your platelets. So If I put my knee on the floor, I would get a bruise just from having my knee touch the floor.
Wow.
Wow.
Just a little nick, unloading dishes from the dishwasher, I could get a huge bruise on my hand just because I dinged it against the counter.
Right.
Something that would give you a tiny bruise, maybe the size of a nickel. When I was about 10 months, I was 11 months out, May 1993. So my child was born in June 1992, and that's when I had my first near-death experience. I had a bruise that spanned my entire hip area.
Oh,
Wow.
And that was really the beginning of that bone marrow suppression. So I was really sick. And it was that feeling of the soul wanting to jump out, because when I had my first near death experience, I was in my body, but then a split second later I was outside my body. And it was a feeling of the soul not having merged back, or maybe because I was just so sick, my blood pressure was so low, but I was always feeling faint. And that second near death experience happened in 2 years later in 1994, because I was so sick. And I left my body for a second time.
And feel free, if you'd like to, kind of give us what that, because actually Richard and I and our producer yesterday were talking about this very thing of, is there stuff on, when people have these near-death experiences, is it a projection of their mind, as you were saying, that you thought that you were losing your mind, or that your mind was playing tricks, or whatever that was for you? But then the second experience really kind of changed that perspective, if I'm correct. Is that accurate to say?
Right. It really changed the perspective, because I went to a place, and I call it the bouncing station because they sent me back, but there was an awareness. It is as if you went into a skyscraper and there was 100 floors, and you say, I'm going to get off at floor 50. That was the feeling. You know that there are floors below you and floors above you. You're just not at those floors. You're at floor 50. And so there was that sensation of there is multi layers of dimensions that we can exist on. And the dimension that I got off of, the floor that I was on, I had that experience of standing in the unconditional white light that many people talk about, and knowing that we come from the light, we are light, we carry this within us, and it's just a matter of connecting to that. Because when we are in our bodies here on earth, we have forgotten who we are and where we came from, because we're having this earthly experience. But during this near-death experience, I met two spirit guides. And they showed me a picture of the earth, but there was a grid around the earth. And they told me that everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that message in 1994, I was sent back. But it is really what initiated my life path, because as I go through life, so this is 29 years ago and 27 years ago, so it really took me a quarter of a century to really understand the impact of that message, and how we really are connected in so many different ways. Ancestrally, we are connected energetically through our DNA, through the actions and reactions and interactions of our own ancestors. I studied ancestral healing with Mark Valin.
Oh yeah, he's been on the show.
We had Mark Williams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a small world.
Yeah.
Right. And it's fascinating. And I work a lot with it now, because this integration of understanding of how we all fit together, and it is in so many different ways we are connected to each other. We're part of something bigger. It's like we're part of the body of Earth, and all of us have a function. It's like looking at each of us is just a cell on the Earth, but we are all connected. We are part of something greater, the universal consciousness, the global consciousness. But we each live our life thinking that it's just us, until we start seeing that, when you start working with ancestral healing, and seeing things repeating. And we understand that it comes through the DNA, which has been proven. I'm sure Mark Valin talked about that.
Yes, he did.
But also, energetically. And for me, that became, after I graduated from med school, I went to Arthur Findlay College in England, and I actually studied mediumship, because now for, 12, 16 years by now, all these messages would come from the spirit world, but I had no control of, can I control when I get a message? Can I get a message for somebody else? And so I went there again, of course, in disbelief. And this was in 2017. I graduated June 2016, took my boards in August of 2016, and then got my license in October of 2016. 6 months later, I'm already at Arthur Findlay College, and I already have written an outline for my book because that was one of the messages. But it's fascinating because even though I had all these experiences and I was clairvoyant and I would see things and hear things, I still doubted that you could actually bring in messages for other people, which is fascinating because if I'm having such a hard time believing in these abilities and the fact that you can actually connect with the spirit world, then think of other people that haven't had a near-death experience. I think of myself before these experiences. If somebody told me that, I would just laugh at them and say, "Oh my gosh, that they're crazy. They think that they can do this, or it's just a coincidence that the person guessed the information, right?" But it's not until you start working with it that you see that the spirit world is as alive and well on the other side. And when we die, it is just our physical body that dies, because you and I, the way we are still there. Our soul, our spirit, and is alive and well on the other side without the body.
I got some questions. My mind's going. I want to get these questions out.
I'm sitting next to you. It's like I'm sitting next to a little generator humming. It's like, and you're like, what?
Yeah. Go ahead. I want to go back to the near-death experiences, particularly the second one. And this is what we were talking about yesterday, Matt. I can't remember the gentleman's book. I should have looked it up. He was a neurosurgeon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Evan Alexander.
Yeah, what was the name of his book? Do you remember? I read it, and I can't remember the name of it. We'll look it up.
I forget the title, but yeah, his name is Evan Alexander. He's a neurosurgeon at Harvard.
Hey, Troy, can you look that up? On just Google him. I want the name of that book because I want the listeners to hear it too. Because when I read that book, Dr. Lotte, it was a lot of what you described was kind of how he described it in his book, right? And I'm curious, like when you were in the light and you were bathing and you felt like you were on this 50th floor of this kind of, did you know that you were Dr. Lotte Valentin, or were you thinking about your kids? Were you thinking about your husband, or were you just kind of immersed, just bathing in the kind of all-knowingness of the experience, if that makes sense, right?
Right. At that point, you're just. I knew I was me, and I was still amazed over the fact that how can this be?
Right.
How can I be outside my body again and still be me? How does this work? And, they were going to send me back, and I said, no. Wait a second. How does this work? How can I still be me?
So your curiosity was piqued, and you were asking questions.
Yeah.
Right? Were you talking, or was it just kind of?
No, telepathic
just
communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just think it. It's just the same when you communicate with the spirit world, or what they teach you when you study mediumship, is because your thoughts, the spirit world hear our thoughts. And so you're communicating telepathically when you're working as a medium. So you're either working clairvoyantly, which is how I usually work. Is I see images a lot. Sometimes I'll hear things, clairaudient, claircognizant. You feel things in the body. And when you go through the training at Arthur Findlay College, you learn which facilities work easier for you. So you tend to be dominant in one way, the way that you communicate. For me, it's clairvoyance. So I see a lot of things.
So you want it for the first half of the show, and I get it for the second half of the show, or how?
Well, listen. Let me answer this one.
Because we're going to be here for a couple of hours.
When you came out of that second one, I'm assuming there was no. Were you able to articulate what happened, or did you struggle with that for a long time? I thought I heard you say it's taken you almost a quarter of a century to kind of get to the point where you can start to explain what happened, right? So were you like, am I crazy? Were you fearful? Did you not fear death anymore? What was it like immediately after the second experience?
Right. So the fear of death just vanished.
Vanished.
It just goes away instantly. because you now understand that you're still alive even outside your body. You're still there.
Yeah.
There is no death. There is just the continuation of life.
We need that amen button. We talked about doing an amen button
we sound effect.
yesterday. We need the sound effect where we can just go, amen. Can I get an amen? Right? Because I think at least when I heard you say that, there was something, a little voice inside of me that went, yay! Right?
Know, right?
Right? There was
I want to know that, right?
Right. There's a little celebration inside that went, kind of like a sense of relief, but then also like childlike that just went, oh, good, right? So now we can kind of put that to rest, that there's not that fear of it's just a dark box in the ground, right? Right. So
There's
I'm sorry,
nothingness.
I kind of interjected in there. So
I was
yeah,
that was a good question, because I was thinking the same thing,
right.
or I was feeling the same thing.
So we just need to tell everybody now. So the podcast is going to shift where we just tell people that you're going to be okay when you die. That's every podcast from here forward. They're going to be okay when you die.
But I guess I'm trying to put myself in that situation. I find myself, because I've had I don't know, moments where I felt like I was connected to the spiritual,
definitely,
and like something physically happens to me, like I could feel it,
and
I haven't, and it's like, you just know, right? There's like no doubt for that brief moment. There's like absolute no
certainty,
doubt. There's absolute 100% certainty.
Right, a knowingness versus a thinkingness, right?
But then I catch myself talking myself out. Then I spend the next week talking myself out of that feeling that wasn't real. I'm trying to validate or justify it, right? And that you're nodding your head. So
yes, absolutely. I went through the same thing. That was just me. That I just thought I heard something or
like, who
felt
am I?
a relative, or until you start understanding that there's something to it. So let me tell you, one of the first times the spirit world came through was a year after my first near-death experience. So it's between my first and second NDE. And I knew that my uncle was sick and that he had lung cancer, but no idea if he was going to pass away even that year or live another 3 years. No idea. And because I wasn't really getting updates from the family, because my whole family is in Sweden. And one night I woke up and I knew my uncle. I couldn't see him, but I knew it was my uncle. He was at the end of the bed and he was looking down on us. And he came to say, I have transitioned. I'm on the other side. And he just came to, send his love and tell me that he had passed.
Yeah.
And so the next day, I expected my mom to call me from Sweden and say, hey, my brother just passed away, and your uncle. And nobody called me. So I said, wow, this is so strange. So I waited to the next day. I said, well, maybe she's just grieving or busy. I'm just going to wait. Wait another day, no calls. Then finally on the third day, she calls me. And, being the good mom she is, she would, check in. How are you doing? How's the baby? How are the other kids? All a little small talk. And then she said, well, I have something sad to report. And I stopped her and I said, yes, your brother, my uncle, passed away 3 days ago. And it was just dead silence on the other side. And she said, how did you know? And I said, Mom, he was here. And the interesting part of her answer is that because she did not know yet about my near-death experience. And she said, you're just like your grandmother, like her own mom, that she would know when people passed away. So I think also there are, we are ancestrally connected again, and certain things may run in families. Some people may be more in tune than other people. And for me, that wake-up call was my near-death experiences to activate that, and for me to understand that. And, looking back on my childhood, I went to Arthur Findlay College, and second time I was there, the teacher looked at me and he said, you were a born medium. And I said, no, I wasn't. Scientist that I am. No, I wasn't. And I said, yes, you were. You saw colors around people when you were a child. And I said, no, I didn't. And I said, think about it. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, yes, I remember being at the island and seeing the colors around my dad going down the hill, and all these things would start flooding back. And it's it's fascinating because being that very scientific, and my dad being a physician, he was like, no, that can't happen. Near death experiences is just in the brain, and it's just what the brain does with the lack of oxygen. He went to med school during World War II. He was born 1918.
Oh, wow.
So very
Yep.
traditional, old science. And so no wonder I was like that. You can't prove it, doesn't exist.
Right.
So that's why it took so long. But I'm hoping to bring that to other people to awaken it, because we all have this, and not to push those experiences down when we feel like, we can sense something. It's there. Tune into it instead of suppressing it. Just say, okay, I'm feeling something. Show me something. Or if you feel like a spirit is in the room, send them a question. Who are you? Can you give me a message? Can you make a noise? If you hear a knock, can you repeat that, please? Do it again. Start communicating if you feel like your loved ones are visiting from the spirit world. Are you getting a message? Are you you could look for evidence. You could say, if you have your father, let's say in the spirit world, if that's you, Dad, tell me something, give me a sign within the next 3 days. Let me find a white feather, or let me see a red bird, because I haven't seen a red bird in 3 years, or let me see, find something else. And then look for that sign and see if it comes through. Because I believe everybody has the ability to communicate with the spirit world and be intuitive. It's just that we are so busy living our life, and we see the reality from our own perception and our own experiences. And so it's just a matter of opening that window and saying, wow, there's a whole other world out there. Just like when you see kids on Facebook getting their first glasses or their first hearing
Oh,
aid.
right. Yeah, yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like, wow, there's a world out there, right? But it's the same for us. Once we tune into these things, we all have that ability.
I like that. When my mom passed away, she passed away at our house, and it was Christmas Eve, 1999, and she'd been sick with emphysema. But the moment she died, and I walked in the room. I know. Have you ever been around anybody when somebody dies like that? Like, it's a very long process, right? I mean, it takes a long time, and and the breasts get. And I looked at her, and then I was like, I don't know if she's going to make it. I just didn't know if maybe this was the day or not. I didn't know, because the death is a long process, right? And so I went and looked at her, and I went into the shower like moments later, which she was sitting in me and my wife's bed, laying in the bed. And then I went to the shower in our bathroom in there, and when I was in the shower, like overwhelming, like I felt like her spirit go through me. And she said, I swear to God, guys, heard her voice say, "I'm leaving now." And I fell down to my knees and started bawling. And my wife walked in. She says, "Rich, your mom's not breathing anymore." And that's,
wow.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But and I dealt with her death with a calmness and a confidence, because that happened. Whereas my dad was like, when I walked out there, my dad was like holding, and it was tough for him, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like I had that confidence to help him, like that. She's not suffering anymore. She's in a better place, all that.
Right.
And but then I talked myself. I found myself in that, like, where did that doubt started creeping in? But I still, I believe it now. I remember that experience like it was, and I wrote it down.
Nice.
I was doing a journal for my daughter, so I had that, because I didn't want to lose the details of what I
that
felt
experience.
in that. Anyway, I just
No, absolutely. Many people have had that experience, and they get bathed in that love. But that person that they're connected to, so it makes perfect sense. You're very close to that person too. You're related. It's your mom. It could be your mom, your sibling, your child, whatever. But it's common that people have that sort of shared death experience with the person who's transitioning, and they feel all that love and warmth. And I believe, like you said, it's easier to cope with the transition because you've been sort of part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I felt blessed that I would to experience that, right? And I don't know.
And so, and I've had, so for me, it's been like, my grandmother coming into my dreams, or I had a friend who passed. I went to high school with him, didn't see him for 20 years, didn't have any connection, never talked to him. But when, we were good friends in high school, but just never reconnected. And he died in a motorcycle accident. But I always thought of him as just such a good person, but just truly good. And I knew he had a good relationship with what I would call God or the Lord. But he didn't go around preaching to people. He just lived his life that way.
Right.
And so after he passed, and I'd never had this experience before, but for years after he passed, I would have dreams pretty regularly, like at least once a month. And any time that he was in the dream, I would never remember quite what was happening in the dream. I just remember him being there, and I would always remember crying. Like in the dream, I would be crying. In reality, I'd be crying. Right? I'd wake up and my pillow would be wet, and it was always I always just remember feeling so grateful that you had that I had that experience. And it was a reoccurring thing, and it hasn't happened for a while, but for several years after he passed, that would, once a month, a couple times a year, it'd just be like this overwhelming sense of grace, or love, or whatever you want to call that.
And how did you process? What does that mean to you? How did you process that?
For me, I think it was just helping me maybe reconnect with love, or reconnect with something bigger than myself. Like when I was maybe asking to, or stumbling, or just having a hard time in life, it was kind of that remembrance, or that reminder, hey, you're not alone, and there's a bigger plan here at play than what you're seeing. So I wanted to ask, Doctor, so now you've got your naturopathic degree. Obviously, you've got this clairvoyant. So how does that show up in practice? So can you give us an example or two of like people that you've worked with, and kind of what they were struggling with, and then what you were able to help them? How are you able to help now, I guess, with these gifts? Because obviously you've got gifts, so how are those showing up?
Right. So I split my time working as a physician and working spiritually with people. So I actually have two websites. One is drlotte.com, and the other one is divinespiritualessence.com. And they're connected. So you can go to one website and connect over to the other one. But so when I work as a physician, you work under your medical license, right? So you got to chart things, you got to code things, you got to order tests, you got to prove that your thinking is, according to science, and that the labs match the symptoms, and medication matches the symptoms, right? So that's all very scientific. So that is my scientific self that has always been there, very logical. And then I work spiritually with people as a medical intuitive ancestral healer, for the most part. I also do work as a medium and psychic, but I would say probably 90% of my work is medical intuitive and ancestral healer. And the interesting part of working spiritually with people is that the people who have been going to the doctor for 10 years and they're not getting better, and they've run all the tests, right? So then they show up in my lab, because now there's only one thing left to get better, and that's to look at things spiritually, because they've exhausted Western medicine. And so what happens is that I communicate typically with this. The spirit world comes in and tells me, sometimes somebody shows up on my screen, and before they even open their mouth, I'll say, so one thing that has happened several times is people showing up with menstrual problems. And I'll say, so I just see them on the screen, and I'll say, do you have really bad menstrual cycles? And they just stare at me, because I'm already getting that message. They haven't even said anything. And that is something that's often misdiagnosed, the endometriosis, and how to approach that. Because you can't see it on a CT scan, you can't see it on an MRI or on an ultrasound. And it's the only way you can really diagnose it is through surgery. But it's a really complicated disease, and it's more like a cancer than anything else, because it grows anywhere. It can grow on your spleen, your liver, it can grow on your brain, it can grow on your diaphragm, it grows on your rectum, your colon. It is like an invasive disease that acts more like a cancer than anything else. But so that's often misdiagnosed. I have had several clients showing up, and right away I know that's the problem. Other times, the beauty of having a medical degree, and it's just coming together for me in the past couple of years, understanding why I needed that medical degree, because I'm working with people medically, and sometimes gets messages about let's run this other test, even though the patient isn't presenting with
Right.
any of those symptoms, the spirit world says, no, they have lung cancer, no, they have liver cancer, and prompts you to run these extra tests that otherwise you would just have said that it's just an allergy, there's nothing wrong, I can't hear one peep in your lungs, and but then you still run the x-ray. You say, well, you're worried, I'm worried, let's just make sure, and then sure enough something will show up. So the spirit world comes in that way, even when I'm working medically. And then spiritually, people will tell me that they've seen 10 doctors for 10 years, they've tried all these different medications, and so having that medical background now, I already understand that there is something else going on. And so they've exhausted the Western medicine, and now we look at it spiritually. So then right away, I understand that this is something that could be ancestral, and going down that path saying, okay, when did it start? What happened right before it started? Tell me about your parents. What happened to your parents or your father when your father was 35? And then invariably, there will be a pattern that shows up. Oh, I've had clients that literally things happened on the ancestral clock. So I worked with somebody the other day who, let's say, they were 40 and then their father passed away. And so the mother became by herself. And then when this client turned 40, she went through a divorce. So she became by herself. So she repeated that pattern of the mother being left alone at the exact same age, and then developed cancer at this exact same age. The mother developed the cancer, and it was even the same cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so that I know, so that ancestral clock, and it's fascinating because when we go to medical school, we're not trained, obviously, in
Right.
in looking at things like that. It's very scientific, and these symptoms you look for these labs, for these scans, and then you treat it this way. So we don't have that spiritual training, and so I work with people spiritually in my spiritual business, and many times you can find these problems. You find the cause of why they can't sleep, why they're getting sick, why they're having problems with their relationships, why they keep getting a headache, why they have an upregulated nervous system. There's all these different reasons that play a role depending on where we came from, what our life is, what we inherited, our environmental impact. And you have to look at all those different components to understand why that person is struggling or why that person is experiencing physical or mental, emotional problems. You have to. So it's become this very interesting merging
Yeah, it's the
of
whole package there.
medical
That's a
knowledge
very
and spiritual. Yeah.
No,
Like-
that yeah, and yes, I agree 110% with everything you've said, and
Yeah.
and that's my general understanding of. I'm not a doctor. I won't say that I'm a psychic or any of those other things, but I do have friends who are doctors who are in that space, and more I'm meeting doctors and physicians that are in that space of realizing that it's not the physical is manifesting what the spiritual or the spirit or the psyche needs to heal, not the reverse, right? So these cancers, tumors, diabetes, all these things are symptoms of a disease that can't be healed just through medicine or through physical means. Is that
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I think in order to heal, you have to work with all three components because you can only, I mean, Western medicine is really to suppress the symptoms with
Right.
medication. You're still experiencing that problem of high blood pressure or cancer or whatever it is, and you get the medications to suppress those symptoms. But you're not really getting rid of the problem or the root cause of that problem until you look at the mental, emotional component and the spiritual component, and then integrate all of those aspects into the healing. So when people get sick, I tell, sometimes because of the work that I'm in, I'll get patients that will tell me, I can heal this, and I don't need any medication. And I always have to remind them that it has now manifested physically. So let's use all the tools
Right.
we have in our tool bag. So let's get on this medication for a while until we can calm things down. Then we can maybe go to the herbal supplements and other supplements and nutritional support to back off on the Western traditional medication. But then we also have to work on the mental, emotional, and spiritual component in order to figure out why this happened in the first place, right? So we go to the doctor, but we have a tendency to want that quick fix.
Sure.
And give me that medicine or give me that pill, and then we suppress the symptoms, and the problem is really still there. It takes a lot of work. The person has to be willing to do the work in order to create that healing, because it's not going to happen without that person changing the perception of the problems that they're experiencing. And it's typically hidden. It's in our subconscious. Yeah.
I've got a good friend who is a physician, Dr. Habib Siddiqui out in LA, and he's got Beehive of Healing as the name of his practice, and he is totally in this space. And I've visited with him professionally, I guess. We're friends, so I go out there once in a while, and he just kind of asks me some questions, and you can just tell that there's a lot going on that I'm not quite aware of.
Right, he's really.
And we end up doing some strange, I was in a hyperbaric chamber last time I went out, and I had a wonderful experience in that hyperbaric chamber that was more of the mental, emotional, where I remembered a time where I'd fallen as a child and hit my ear, and there was trying to hide it from my parents, and it was bleeding and all this stuff, but it was because my ear wouldn't pressurize in that hyperbaric chamber, and so it was creating a lot of pain. But once I had the awareness of it, then that pain subsided. The ear never cleared, but the pain went away. And then eventually over a week of not being in the chamber, the ear cleared. So it was but it was interesting that that's what had to happen for me to be in touch with that suppressed trauma, I guess, if I wanted to call it that, in the body. And who knows what that could have shown up if I hadn't eventually experienced it. I mean, I think a lot of times the healing is the experiencing of truly experiencing instead of suppressing the emotion. Is that accurate to say?
Right. So once you realize why it's there, and you can, it releases.
Right.
If people heal miraculously through having a near-death experience, like Anita Marjani, who had lymphoma. Most people are aware of her story, and then she had a near-death experience, and then 2 weeks later, all the cancer was gone, but her organs were shutting down. Her parents had been told to come to the hospital. She has this experience, and all of a sudden it's like a switch gets flipped, and everything just heals. But the fact that some people have these experiences and they have a miraculous healing, and scientists, us doctors will just say miraculous healing, because how do we explain that? We don't know how it works.
Right.
But it is possible, right? So once you create that awareness, you have this shift. And so everything is going to change. Your expression of your own physiological and biochemical reactions are going to change. If I put you in the jungle in front of a lion, you're not going to think about, oh, I'm going to dilate my pupils. Oh, I'm going to make my heart beat faster.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just going to happen.
Right.
But it's the same thing with when you have an aha moment for healing. If we can just tap into that, because once you create that awareness, everything changes, and it's automatically you're coding differently now. You're changing the expression of those reactions within yourself, and you're flipping your own DNA via your epigenetics through your own actions and reactions and interactions, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And do you still see auras, colors around people?
Sometimes, but not often.
Oh, is that right? It's kind of just when you're in the...
Once in a while, I'll get a glimpse of it, and sometimes you just know things, and maybe it's just subconscious.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to experiment on Richard.
Yeah, what color am I?
I was
Nothing
like,
but dark black halo.
Right.
Big black
Very
halo
dark
around
and
me.
heavy. No. I was like, let's have fun on the show today. Let's dissect Richard.
Let's not.
At a cellular level. This could be fun for us.
Yeah, one of my, we need to get her on the show, Dr. Jane Warlow. She's friend, mentor. She's the one that got me into coaching, actually. She had the similar experience where medically they had exhausted. They didn't know what was wrong with her. And her organs were shutting. She was dying. And she connected with the spiritual, kind of had a spiritual awakening and an aha, and it turned it around. I mean, she's living proof. Just one, I'm sure, of many examples that you've probably come across, Dr. Lotte. But yeah, she talked about that. I had her on my show years ago, and we've become friends. But she the only way she can explain it is through tapping into the spiritual side of herself, and her body healed. It healed itself. Now, she's not an advocate of like, oh, ignore Western medicine.
Right.
She's kind of like with you. I mean, I love your approach.
Yeah, I do too.
It seems so instinctual. It seems so intuitive to me that that's how everybody should approach medicine. But I would probably imagine that you get a lot of pushback from some people in the medical community, or you have maybe, or maybe not. I don't know.
I haven't really, I mean, not personally, I haven't, but I'm sure there are people that are aware of me that think I'm an absolute lunatic, right? Because they're where I was before my near-death experiences and before my own development of the understanding that we are still there when we die. So I understand why they would think that about me, because that's who I was. I came from that.
Yeah.
I would have thought that if I hadn't had my experiences
Sure.
and my life journey that has brought me to this understanding, I would think that they're just crazy.
So is your hope with this book that people, if someone picks up this book, I mean, everything we talked about here today is in this book. Is this, who are you hoping to attract that picks up this book?
So it's funny because I wrote it, being my first book, I did some research, how do you write a book? Well, you have to consider your target audience. And I said, well, I'm a woman. But the spirit world told me to call the book Med School After Menopause, to inspire other women that just because you hit menopause, your life is not over. That's when your life starts. Your children are growing up. Now you have more freedom. You can go after your true passion. And so I really wrote the book with people in mind, maybe 35 to 55 age group. And the funny part is that I have gotten so much feedback from men.
Yeah.
Really?
From in their 30s to their 70s, and how they love the book. And I can think of 2 people right away that have read it 2 or 3 times. They've gone back and reread the book. And it's fascinating to see that was how I was guided, was really to write it for women. But the men it is as important for men as it is for women, because it really just tells you to go after your true passion. And how do you do that? How do you awaken that within yourself? How do you find that within yourself? And after each chapter, so I tell stories from my own life and my own experiences, so the 2 near-death experiences are in there in detail, but also other events, my most embarrassing moment of my life, and just funny things and crazy things that, I've done, and raising kids and going to med school. What was that like? I thought I was nuts when I got there. It's like, oh my gosh, I put my whole, career, my whole livelihood on hold, and I'm doing this. And I still had doubts about it. And I would say that's just normal. It's a normal human experience. But after each chapter, when I tell some story from my own life, let me take a sip of water. When I tell stories from my own life, after each chapter, there is a specific message and a very short exercise that you can easily incorporate into your life. So it's by reading the book from the beginning to the end, I take you on a journey to develop you spiritually and intuitively. So you're not going to be the same person you are when you read the last chapter as you were when you read the first chapter. Because by sharing my own journey and then pointing out exactly, this is the kind of the take-home message here for you, and think about this, and then moving into the next level and the next level. And so the book goes on like that until, the last chapter.
I love it. I love that. I mean, I understand how probably the publishers, like, the riches are always in the niches, right? And so, so you got to write it and target it. But it just sounds so universal, right? I can imagine, I can easily see myself going through this book and deep diving on this, because I think your message is a universal one, right? It sounds great to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
is a universal message. And it's also now out on audiobook on
Awesome.
Nice.
over
Did
40
you
platforms.
did you read it, or did you have somebody else record it?
I did. I
Good.
did
you
read it,
really?
yeah.
Good for
always,
you.
I always love it when the
Oh,
author. I love it when the
yeah.
author records it in their voice. I always get a little disappointed when I get an audiobook and they hired some actor to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Right. It's just different because it's
Your stories.
it is my story, it's my journey, and it's my vibrational frequency of my
Yeah,
voice
absolutely.
that you're getting, because it's all just
I'm
frequencies.
gonna download it on Audible
me
today.
too. I'm
gonna download it. I try to listen to audiobooks all the time. So yeah.
I'm so fascinated. I'm looking at the clock, and we're running out of time. Matt, I didn't want to hijack any of your questions. I know I had a ton, and we could probably talk a couple hours with her. But
I'm just so grateful that you came on today, and just so happy to have met you, and hopefully we have conversations in the future. And as you release book 2 and book 3, certainly let us be a part of that process of helping get the word out, because it's I just love your energy. I love your message. I love your story. I mean, I want to give you an air hug through the through the podcast, because I just really appreciate. In fact, and I get down to Phoenix every once in a while. You maybe get down to Phoenix, but I'd love to stop by and see you or have lunch or whatever that would look like. Yeah. Just to be. I love people that are doing work like you're doing. So
hopefully,
I really
this is the beginning of a long connection with us and the show. We really appreciate what you're doing. This is just. I really enjoyed this conversation. Yeah. How can people, we've talked about the book. Oh, I wanted to mention, Troy looked up, that book was Dr. Alexander. What was his first name, Dr. Lottie?
Proof of Heaven.
Oh, Eben Alexander.
Eben Alexander. The book is Proof of Heaven,
right?
Which I highly recommend. And I'm going to deep dive into your book, and it sounds like a lot of the same experiences. So
you got the 2 websites. You've got the book, Med School After Menopause.
How else can people connect?
Yeah, is there any other, are those the best ways, or?
Yeah. So either go to drlotte.com, drlotte.com, or divinespiritualessence.com. And the 2 websites are linked, so you can go from one to the other. Sure. But there is I'm always teaching classes are coming up, and I have a newsletter that goes out every week. I do have my own podcast where I interview other physicians, physical therapists, spiritual leaders, shamans, to help bridge that gap between science and soul, and just help people create healing so that they know where to find the information that they need in order to create healing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in their life. So bringing, I've even interviewed surgeons, for example, for endometriosis. That is a diagnosis that is often missed because of the complications of that. So it's a great resource for people that are looking for ways to heal, and looking for people that are working non-traditionally or paving the way for new treatments of just different diseases. And so that's a great podcast too. It's called Dr. Lottie's Science with Soul.
Nice.
They can find that on my website as well.
All right. We'll have links to all of this stuff in the show notes. Go check out our stuff, guys. This is amazing stuff. Dr. Lottie, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a true blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Next Level Method podcast. If you found some value in this, tell somebody about the show. Tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell your kids. Let them know all about Next Level Method. And go to nextlevelmethod.com to learn more and join our community. Thanks for tuning in.